June 25, 1876, a fateful day that would echo across the pages of history. The Battle of the Little Bighorn. A story of courage, chaos, and catastrophe. Amidst the relentless charge of native Cheyenne and Lakota warriors, one man emerged as a messenger of survival. Daniel Kanipe. Who was this sergeant, handpicked by Custer to deliver an urgent message? How did he escape the crushing tide that swept away Custer and his men? Kanipe's journey offers a rare window into the events of that tragic day and the haunting choices that sealed his fate and spared his life. Was it sheer luck, a twist of fate, or divine intervention? Join us as we uncover the harrowing details of Daniel Kanipe's escape, his haunting eyewitness account, and the deadly mistakes that led to one of history's most infamous massacres. On May 17, 1876, we embarked on what turned out to be a disastrous expedition. We set out for the Yellowstone River, marching 12 miles to the Big Heart River, where we made camp and stayed for some time scouting the area. Around June 10, we moved to the Powder River. 6 of the 12 companies went on a scouting mission, leaving the wagon train at the Powder River and carrying 10 days' rations on pack mules. For 2 days, we followed the Powder River, then veered toward the Tongue River, and on the Rosebud River, we discovered an Indian trail. At sundown, we brewed some coffee and followed the trail all night. The next morning, after more coffee, we resumed marching up the trail until noon. General Reno, leading this detachment, realized the rations were running low and decided to turn back. We rejoined the remaining companies under General Custer at the junction of the Rosebud and Yellowstone rivers. General Terry, the department commander, was present, and General Custer was reportedly under arrest due to conflicts over post-trader concessions, which were later eliminated due to scandals during President Grant's tenure. Why, those fellows had things so that you couldn't buy anything at the posts without getting it from them. Liquor was 25 cents a glass and the glasses were mostly Glass Mighty Little whiskey. Custer set a maximum price and it caused his arrest. But all the high army officers were with him and he was given a command at the place I spoke of. On July 22, Custer's outfit drew 15 days' rations off the steamboat Far West that was in the river. There were 2 Rodman guns and 2 Gatling guns in a battery with Custer. He thought that he could get along without them, and he turned them over to General Gibbon, who carried them across the river. There's where he made a mistake, as we see it now, because if he had had one of those Rodman guns and had fired at one time, those Indians wouldn't have stopped running yet. No siree, would still be running. And if we'd had one of the Gatling guns, there would have been a lot more survivors than me. There would never have been any Custer massacre. On June 22, we broke camp and started marching all day. That evening Custer issued orders that there would be no more bugle calls and only fire enough to make coffee, and that commands would be given by signs. On the morning of June 23, we started out. We marched until nearly night, then camped and continued on the next morning, June 24. That day we came to a place where the Indians had had a sundance, and had staged a war dance, too. They had built brush sheds out of the cottonwood trees, and the ground was patted down smooth and hard, where they had been dancing about on it. 6 Crow Indian scouts that were with our regiment had come on ahead and they had found the scalp of a white man. That was from the head of a soldier with Gibbon's command. Well, sir, when those Indians, they hated the Sioux, the ones we were hunting, anyway, found the scalp hanging on a willow twig, they sure had a fit. Just cut up in general and yelled and hollered and danced about. What did they want? Why, if they had had a Sioux there, then it would have been a bad day for him, they were that mad. They brought the scalp back to General Custer, who passed it around to the men after looking at it. Sergeant Finley, who was the oldest line sergeant in my company, had it in his saddle pockets when he was massacred. We marched all day June 24. Indian scouts that had been sent ahead returned that night about 10 o'clock. It was just dark. We got orders that night to saddle and pack up. We marched all night, coming close to the junction of the Rosebud and the Little Bighorn River. So General Custer took the regiment into a ravine that looked as though we could keep concealed there as long as we wanted to. But, in coming in, as we were riding at a hard trot and a gallop, Quartermaster Sergeant Hurst lost some hard bread from the packs of some of the pack trains. Learning this, General Custer ordered the sergeant to go back and get the bread. But when the sergeant reached the point where the bread had dropped out, there were 2 Indians helping themselves to it. They ran at the approach of the soldiers. Coming back to camp, this incident was reported to General Custer and he ordered us to saddle up. I reasoned it out that he had planned to surprise the Indians the next morning, but as they already knew that we were there, he was going to do it now. We marched up the divide and halted. General Custer took the chief trumpeter, Henry Voss, and 2 scouts and was gone for 2 hours. When he came back, he divided the regiment into 3 detachments. He gave Major Reno 3 troops, A, M, and G, Captain Benteen 3 troops, H, K, and D, and gave Captain McDougal charge of the pack train with Troop B. He then took for himself troops C, E, I, and F. Leaving that place, we went out this way. Major Reno was to the left and abreast with General Custer and Captain Benteen to the left of Major Reno. You could tell that the plan was to strike the Indian camp at 3 places. Captain McDougal was to bring the pack train up the main Indian trail. We went at a gallop. Turning down what is now Benteen's Creek, we made our way to a crossing and found a vacated Indian camp on the other side. The fires were not all out. There was a dead Indian in one of the teepees that was still standing. General Custer ordered the teepee fired. Major Reno came in sight and he was signaled to cross Benteen Creek and did so. General Custer, with 3 companies, pushed down the creek. When we reached within a quarter of a mile of the junction of Benteen's Creek with the Little Bighorn, I sighted Indians on the top of the range of bluffs over the Little Bighorn River. I said to First Sergeant Bobo, "There are the Indians." General Custer threw up his head about that time and we troops C, E, I, and F headed for the range of bluffs where we had seen the Indians. Tom Custer, brother of the general, was captain of my troop, C. We rode hard, but when we reached the top the Indians were gone. However, we could see the teepees for miles. The Crow Indian scouts with our outfit wanted to slip down and get a few ponies. Some of them did slip down, but they got shot for their pains. Chief Scout Mitch Boyer, Curly, a Crow, and Bloody Knife Rivera stayed up on the bluffs with us. Well, sir, when the men of those 4 troops saw the Indian camp down in the valley, they began to holler and yell, and we galloped along to the far end of the bluffs, where we could swoop down on the camp. I was riding close to Sergeant Finkel. We were both close to Captain Tom Custer. Finkel hollered at me that he couldn't make it, his horse was giving out. I answered back, "Come on, Finkel, if you can." He dropped back a bit. Just then the captain told me to go back and find McDougal and the pack train and deliver to them orders that had just been issued by General Custer. "Tell McDougal," he said, "to bring the pack train straight across to high ground. If packs get loose, don't stop to fix them, cut them off. Come quick. Big Indian camp." I went back. I thought then that was tough luck, but it proved to be my salvation. If Sergeant Finkel had not dropped back a few minutes before, he would have got the orders and I would not be telling this story. Away off in the distance, the dust rolling up like a little cloud, I saw the pack train. I went toward that. My company and the others went on down toward the Indian camp. I remember the last words that I heard General Custer say. The men were on the hill, we all gave them 3 cheers, riding at a full gallop. Some of them couldn't hold their horses, galloping past General Custer. He shouted at them, "Boys, hold your horses, there are plenty of them down there for us all." They rode on. I rode back. Reaching the pack train, I gave Captain McDougal the orders sent to him, and went on toward Captain Benteen as I had been told to take them to him, also. McDougal and his outfit rode onto the top of the hill and reinforced Major Reno as he retired from the bottom of the bluffs. The Indians were following close at their heels, shooting and yelling, and men were dropping here and there. They, the Indians, would hop on them and scalp them before we could rescue them. Dr. DeWolf was killed just as he reached the top of the hill. If he had gotten a few feet further, he would have been saved. As I went back after Captain Benteen, I saw some Indians running along. I thought they were hostile Indians and got ready to give them a few rounds before they got me, but they were scouts who were making their way away from the big battle that was going on. They had come from Major Reno's command and they were so scared that they did not stop until they reached the Powder River. Delivering the orders to Captain Benteen, I rode back to the top of the ridge with the battalion, and there we joined the others under Major Reno and McDougal. The Indians were between this outfit and General Custer, so I could not join my company. Major Reno started to march out on the range of bluffs there and attack the Indians, but they came at us and we retired, and formed skirmish lines. But, before we could do that, we lost several men and they were scalped before we could get to them. They shot at us all day, then at night they powwowed until daylight on the 26th. Then they started out again shooting and charging. We killed many, just how many I do not know. We were cut off from water, and there were 68 wounded men in camp. A wounded man wanted water badly, and it was pitiful to hear their groans as they called for it, and we couldn't get it. Some fellows tried to go for it but got shot and had no such luck as bringing any for the wounded. I remember the first shot that was fired in that 2-day battle. It went right under my horse's belly and lodged in the bank. There were 14 men and 2 officers, Lieutenant Harrington and Lieutenant Sturgis, that never were found. It was said that the Indians cut off their heads and dragged them around as they powwowed during the night. There were 56 men in our outfit killed on the hill by the Indians. Well, they kept up the shooting all through the day of the 26th, until late in the evening we could see the camp begin to move. The warriors kept shooting at us and the squaws were getting the camp moved. On the morning of the 27th there was not an Indian in sight. We got water and made coffee and relieved the suffering of the wounded as best we could. About 10 o'clock General Gibbon and his command arrived. General Terry, department commander, came with him. When General Terry came up, lusty cheers greeted him. He cried like a baby. Then he told us that he had seen 200 men in the valley below, and we knew that General Custer and the 4 companies had been wiped out. We had thought that maybe he had been corralled as we were. Late on the afternoon of the 27th, Captain Benteen went to the battlefield, and I was allowed to go with him and look about wherever I wanted to. I looked over the dead and recognized here and there a buddy and a sergeant that I knew. I recognized Sergeants Finkel and Finley. Sergeant Finley lay at his horse's, Carlo, head. He had 12 arrows through him. They had been lying there for 2 days in the sun, bloody and the wounded mutilated. You could tell what men had been wounded because the little Indians and the squaws would always, after taking the clothes off the men, shoot them full of arrows or chop them in the faces with tomahawks. They never hurt a dead man, just those that were wounded. In all this pile of men, not one had a stitch of clothes on. The Indians had taken it all. They must have gotten about $25,000 in money off of them, too, for we had just been paid at Powder River Camp before we left on the campaign and there had been nothing to spend a cent for. I saw where the last ones fell. They were in a little heap. General Custer lay across a couple of men, the small of his back only, touching the ground. The dead were thick around him. He had been shot through the heart. My captain, Tom Custer, a brother of the general, was near this last bunch, as was his brother-in-law, Lieutenant Calhoun, who was in command of the H Troop. In that battle, there were fully 4,000 Indians besides the squaws, making a total of between 12,000 and 15,000 Indians in all. And on the whole field where Custer and those 4 companies were wiped out, not a living being was left to tell the tale. One horse survived. His name was Comanche. When he was found, he had 7 bullet wounds. He was Captain Keogh's horse. Well, there were a good many dead Indians. We found 3 teepees standing with 75 Indians in them, and there is no telling how many more were carried away when they moved camp. I thought I would cut one of them out of the blankets and buffalo robes he was wrapped in. When I did, I found that he had a string of scalps as long as your arm, and among those were 4 women's, with hair as long as my arm, 2 of them having red hair. It was a sight. I dropped them, didn't want them. They buried the dead and then began to carry the wounded, including the horse Comanche, to the Far West steamboat which had come up the river as far as it could. It then backed down to the Yellowstone River. Most of the wounded got well. Old Comanche did, and there was an order from General Headquarters that this only survivor, in fact, of Custer's battle was to have a box stall for the rest of his life. One man out of the 7th Cavalry Band was assigned to look after him, and on dress parade old Comanche would be led at the head of the regiment, draped in black. What became of the Indians? Why did they go on? My regiment did not try to hunt them. We were all shot to pieces. If you find this first-hand account of the Little Bighorn battle interesting, subscribe to Native Legacy for deep dives into Native American history, culture, and pivotal battles like the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Don't forget to like, comment, and share to keep history alive. Thanks.